a quick note for you. Recording in progress, everyone. I do have a quick note for you, Kane, that your presentation didn't come through to my inbox.
You just put me on the spot, sweet.
I've just seen. We had a few technical issues, guys, just before this, whilst we were trying to sort out Kane's presentation. Are you going to be okay with?
Yeah, I'll freestyle it. It's yeah, we'll freestyle it. It's cool. Yeah, my outbox is showing we can't find anything, so that's yeah, we'll freestyle away.
Excellent. I'm sure you know what you're doing. You've just lived it. It's fine.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, super. Perfect. Thank you, Kane. And guys, this is Kane from Anglian Group. He's going to talk to us about metalwork and fluids.
Yeah, super. Hi all. Let me just bring up my presentation because Natasha's put me on the spot on this one. It's fine. It's my fault. I should have sent it an hour ago. There we go. Does that show, Natasha? Yeah, super. Yeah, hi all. Yeah, thank you for your time today, and yeah, welcome to some new members, and there's some former friends and colleagues as well on the call. So yeah, good to see everyone. So my role is Health and Safety Manager within Anglian Home Improvements, and the scope of my role is looking after the Manufacturing and Central Function Division. I just want to share some experience of recent HSE engagement around metalworking fluids, and really share firsthand some of my learnings from that, and yet to share those pieces to other practitioners. Is that rotated through all right, Natasha? Yeah, super. So as far as an induction piece, obviously metalworking fluids are used within various sectors, primarily around fabrication, and they're used as a cooling agent and a lubricating agent so that the tool can do its work. With regards to the legal aspect to this, there's not a specific piece of legislation which focuses on metalworking fluids. It comes under multiple parameters. So you'd have the COSH regulations, you also have the PURE regulations, and then basically your Management Health and Safety Work Act, and then the Formal Health and Safety Work Act. So there's not a specific piece of legislation to reference. It's really across that breadth of multiple sections, which yeah, you just got to keep your eye on all of those. Keep your eyes on all of those pieces, as we always do. With regards to the last comms that came out, those who do subscribe to HSE emails, their last set of comms that they pushed out was the 17th of February, and that was a notification regarding they were going to start inspections, and this was focused around metalworking fluids and welding fumes at the time. And there has been a number of visits to many organisations since that point, and I'm sure that we'll come to read those in the IOSH in the IOSH media in the coming months when some of those bits move forward. Just to continue on that legal piece as well, in fairness to the HSE, they've done an absolutely fantastic job at providing the information on their platform. Go onto their website, there's really good case studies. There's 5 case studies on there, and they all refer to respiratory issues. And there's not much of a focus around the dermatitis aspect. However, there's a really big piece, and some of the cases are really quite interesting to flick through. One of them in particular has got a £800,000 fine associated to it, and that was due to an outbreak, as the root cause being poor management of metalworking fluids. So ultimately, there's 2 health issues which are associated with metalworking fluids. The first one of those being dermatitis, from a skin perspective. Now, with the dermatitis aspect, as with all these things, you can't just put proactive as back being, sorry, maybe reactive as back being proactive as well. So as well as undertake toolbox talks, encouraging employees to do regular skin checks, it's important that we put that contact there and try to proactively encourage it. And then the second issue is the breathing issues, ordinarily in the form of occupational asthma, which sees the reducing of the airways, or pneumonia is the other case. It's hypersensitive pneumonia. So how do we manage those risks, those hazards? How do we do that? Well, we do it in the normal fashion. We risk assess it, and from that risk assessment approach, we don't do anything any differently. We just follow that hierarchy of control approach. First thing to do is to eliminate the hazards. Eliminating is always that ideal one, as we know. It's always the most challenging one as well. But essentially, if we can eliminate it, sometimes that's around outsourcing it as such, but you're moving the problem, but you're giving that problem to someone else. But you could eliminate it from your organisation and from your risk profile. If that's not possible, substitution. So what does substitution look like? Can you in-source an alternative lubricant? Can you find one that's water-based rather than being an oil-based one? Looking at safety data sheets, other alternatives, and work with your procurement teams to see if you can source a safer method. With regards to the administrative controls, there's a magnitude of administrative controls. Those can be things like splash guards, LED systems, could also be flow meters. So if the tool's not spinning, for example, then the flow would stop. You could have physical light guards. There's a whole breadth of engineering controls that are available to us. And then in the administrative controls aspects, you look at your safe systems of work. Are the risk assessments up to date? The standard operating procedures and the work instructions, are they appropriate? And for me, the experience that I had with health and safety, that's really where they want to drill into the historical data to show how have we been managing this risk in the past, and we were able to evidence the standard operating procedures, the risk assessments, and that puts in really good light from that side. And then obviously we're on to PPE being the last line of defence. In regards to PPE, there's value in looking at whether the exposure is from the respiratory side. If you are aspirating those particles into very fines, then there is that risk, and you should undertake that qualitative risk assessment or quantitative. And one of the administrative controls on that as well is health surveillance. With regards to the health surveillance piece, I already mentioned the skin checks, but also you'd expect to see breathing assessments. So engaging with the occupational health physicians and health teams, and if there is that risk, then they should be undertaking periodic skin assessments and lung breathing assessments. Just a little bit on this piece, because it's quite fluid at the moment post-COVID. From an occupational health perspective, they've stopped doing the lung function tests over the COVID period. I believe that's still to be the case, but that may have been reintroduced. But there was a bit of a consensus for a couple of white papers within the occupational health community that they weren't actually going to reinstigate the breathing assessments. But I'm sure that we'll see that develop post-COVID. With regards to the storage of metalworking fluids, the storage of metalworking fluids is really important. And the reason behind that is if they're exposed to frost or certain temperature parameters, all within the safety data sheet. But if they're outside of those parameters, what you find is the metalwork fluid will actually degrade, and that gives a higher chance of the bacterial growth in the fluid. So then when it is aspirated on the tool and makes contact, there's then more likely a chance of the dermatitis, the pH values being abnormal and finding their way to an unsafe parameter in a quicker way than they ordinarily would. So with regards to working with metalworking fluids, and I did have a nice list of notes on my notes page, but as with my IT issues on this, we'll see if we can see if I can rattle some of them off. But essentially, when you're working with metalworking fluids, there's a number of aspects to that. There's the preparation of the fluids, so the combination of mixing water with the metalworking fluid, and that needs to have its standard operating procedures for that specific aspect. And it's really important that it's at the right concentration. If it's not in the right concentration, you'll find, and ordinarily you would use a refractometer to measure to get that balance right. And yeah, that's to ensure that, as per my previous point, that that's in the right parameters as per your safety data sheets. Another aspect is so you've done the mixing aspect. Now you're going to use it. In that using piece, you can see in here there's swarf built up in the beds or in the troughs on the machinery. That's ensuring that those are cleaned out regularly and they're well maintained. And then you've got the disposal aspects, which we'll come onto as a separate slide. So as well as looking after the pH and your metalworking fluids, say systems of work, something else that you need to monitor is the temperature. The temperature, obviously, with a higher temperature, you get higher vapor pressure, and those vapor pressures increase the likelihood of the occupational asthma piece. With regards to the asthma piece, the numbers associated with that between 1,500 and 3,000 people affected every year from occupational asthma, and certainly within the EHS community, the HSE are going to move forward with this in assuming they have a higher focus in the future moving forward. So those numbers still haven't, or those numbers haven't quite plateaued from an occupational asthma perspective. And again, continuing with this metalwork, the maintaining aspect is to ensure that that you're undertaking the regular dip slides. Those are being sent for. You put those in an incubator and establish how much bacteria is grown within the tramp oil systems. Not just your tramp oil systems, of course, it'll be your reservoirs as well. Additionally, ensuring that your systems are cleaned out. You undertake the daily pre-start checks. That's really important. Undertaking checks for the odour and the look, the visual check. That's ordinarily undertaken on a daily. A weekly would consist of a temperature check, and then monthly you would expect to see dip tests and the refractometer tests. So with regards to system cleaning, the guidance is around system cleaning is there should be a structured safe system of work in order to manage that. Where we start creeping into the territory, if I just get back a slide, where we start creeping into the territory, if you start to see the build-up of bacteria in those, it's really important that they're cleaned out correctly and that you've got a safe system of work. There's also I'd probably recommend that you have a separate standard operating procedure just for that activity. May or well be covered under your one risk assessment of metalworking fluids, but certainly from my perspective, I've gone with a separate risk assessment for metalwork fluid cleanouts. So just continuing on the engineering solutions, there was a couple of my notes, but I'm not able to get to them, so that's fine. I'm pretty certain I've covered those bits. This was a section around actually looking at the exposure, and this image comes from the Metalworking Fluids Good Practice Guide, which is on the HSE website. If you have got metalworking fluids within your organisation and it's a little bit of a grey area for you guys, then please drill into that. The granular detail of the Good Practice Guide is really good and includes the images, which I've taken this one from just to give a really good training piece, really to show that where that blade is spinning or where that tool's rotating, these fine mist particles can really go quite far and wide. And then that ties in nicely with the provision of PPE. So where you have got those exposure, obviously following that hierarchy of control approach. But from an RPE perspective, the recommended guidance is for triple FP3 RPE systems. And then just to signpost you with regards to the best practice guide for the disposal, it's within the original, it's within the Good Practice Guide, and it does signpost to this document that talks about the safe disposal. And additionally, within that, that's also refers to the emergency scenarios. So if you've had a catastrophic failure, if you've had a large spill or something like that, it talks about a good method for disposal on that. And obviously, what we don't want to see is these types of fluids or COSH ending up in general landfill, they should be disposed of in the right way. From that side, it's always worth engaging with waste management partners, ensuring that you're getting waste transfer, notice back, as well as be disposed of correctly. And as I just outlined, that emergency spill process, it's worth drilling into actually what is your response plan. And if from a 45 and 14,001 ISO accreditation process, there's always some value in tying those into those clauses, which sit within both of those standards. So you can evidence things like spill drills and then roll out some scenarios as well. So just what signpost as additional guidance. This was the metalworking fluid guides, version 2.2 is out there at the moment. It was last updated in January 21, I believe, there or thereabouts, it's only early 21. But you've also got other guides out there, which absolutely, the wealth of information there through the HSE website has been very helpful. And as I said, there's those 5 specific case studies, which really drill into the thought process of the HSE when they've gone through various prosecutions. So in regards to from a summary for the bits that we've gone through today, we've gone through obviously the legal aspects. As I say, it's not just there's not a specific set of regulations there related to metalworking fluids. It's across a breadth of regulations. The basic ones that we know as health and safety practitioners. There's the moral reasons. 3,000 people have suffered from the asthma side of things. The dermatitis, I haven't got any data to drill into with regards to the dermatitis, but certainly it is an issue that's out there. And the financial implications. If you're trying to get those stakeholders on board, if from the legal perspective, and from the moral perspective, and if you're not getting things over the line, then there's always the financial aspect. I believe it's the Main Baker which fell short of the regulations, and £800,000 was their fine. So yeah, if you need to get stakeholders on board, those cases really do evidence the information. The hazards, whatever that is, I'll go with hazards. The hazards on that, obviously, we've gone with asthma, HP being the hypersensitive pneumonia. There's a slightly different method. So it's essentially hypersensitive pneumonia and dermatitis. The control measures that we've just outlined, and again, you can follow that quantitative or qualitative process system. And then within control measures, certainly something that we've done is we've then embedded that into our normal integrity plan. So every year we'll undertake deep dive audits to make sure that those processes are being followed. But as far as local management, they should be doing things like regular inspections, the toolbox talks, the occupational health monitoring. There's an array of control measures, and as I say, a lot of those are really well outlined in that good practice guide. Published. It wasn't published by the HSE, it's published by an independent body, but it's via the HSE website. So with those hazards and those control measures, essentially control that risk and protect our people. And then finally, the review aspects, just following that plan, do, check, act cycle. We implement the control measures, we do the doing, and they're in operation. But then we need to do the auditing, the checking process, and make sure that they are working effectively. Also engaging with occupational health, getting that information in. Is there anything reactively that we need to react to? Obviously, off the back of that, if there is occupational diseases reported, we've then got the riddle aspect to consider. And then to follow that plan, do, check, act piece. And then find that review aspect. So I didn't put a session in there with Natasha with regards to the Q&A aspect to put questions in the question box. So I'll just ping through those. Yeah,
it's fine. We've we dealt with it. It's not a problem.
Yeah. Andy asked a good question. Are there effective water-based metalworking fluids. And the answer to the question is yes, there is, Andy. They are. It depends on the material you're cutting, the specified piece of equipment. Ordinarily, there are. I know CNC machines that are out there that use water-based, and they will present a slightly different hazard. Obviously, we always need to consider that Legionella aspect as well. But yeah, there are water systems out there. Do they have the same? Is it preferable to go with water systems rather than water-based metalworking fluids? Yes, it is. That is a more preferable solution. So on that engineering, from that substitution side, the water-based metalworking fluids would be a good avenue to look at. Yeah. Super.
Oh, Julian's just.
Sorry, it was a comment rather than I think you were talking about the incidence of dermatitis.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It just puts it into context, really.
Yeah, that's yeah, certainly. And I'd be interested to know what that's done in the past, whether that's a normal or abnormal number, and whether that's headed in the right or wrong direction.
Yeah.
Probably because we're now talking about it and we're now considering it as health and safety practitioners, and as the HSE have pushed the interest of it, I imagine the profile will go up. Will go up initially as we gather more information about that. But yeah, good research on that. Yeah, thank you. I'll certainly include that in my training package.
Very useful.
Not to plagiarise, obviously.
Yeah, obviously not. But yeah, thanks, Julian. Yeah, it's always really interesting, isn't it? You talk about, the standards, what there is out there, all of these different options and things that people aren't necessarily aware of. Thinking about, safer metalworking fluids that you can use, and you mentioned about the Legionella risk. If you're looking at water-based, you've got to look at other issues and other risks, as we do. We trade things out and then find that we've got another issue to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you move that risk? Sorry, my internet's a bit jittery. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Do you move that risk profile by introducing another hazard? But then I guess you've got to go through that assessment piece as to what is reducing it as low as reasonably practicable, ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. That comparative risk, again, just comparing them and seeing which one's best or not. Sometimes the bit people forget, I think, is documenting how they've made that decision. Why would you go with one over the other? I think a lot of the time we forget to even document why we would make that decision. We just assume that the risk assessment's been updated and it's fine. So yeah, and also keeping a track of why you might not choose a safer substance as well, or a safer process, because there are reasons for not doing something, in that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. From that side, if you're using various metals, say you're cutting something like hassle or a precious metal, you may choose to go with a high risk because it's going to compromise on quality, for example. That's okay to say that forms part of your assessment. There's no point making twice as much because your product is substandard. It has to meet a certain specification for your client. So yeah, that's a very good point. And I guess that's, as health and safety practitioners, that's why it's really important that we work with our quality partners and our engineering partners to try to capture that information as best as possible. So yes, it's a very good point, Tasha.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, keeping that that holistic approach of the business as well at the same time. I don't want to talk people out of doing safer things. God forbid, I'm a safety professional, but there are other pressures within organisations. I think as safety professionals, we have to make sure that we stay aware of that. Rather than just sort of beating people with a stick into submission and then finding that, as you say, Kane, the quality is deteriorated and you don't have a product in the same way as you would have done before. It's keeping that balance, isn't it? What you said about storage was interesting, Kane. I think it's one of those things that a lot of people forget a lot of the time is actually the safe storage of metalworking fluids to make sure that they don't deteriorate. I don't know if you can tell us a bit more about your experience with the storage.
Yeah, from a storage perspective, if you store it outside in ISO containers or something like that, or from an engineering perspective, they're not normally warm heated areas, are they? They're normally a load of lathes and mills at the back of a building with from an old engineering workshop perspective. But yeah, ordinarily they may be stored outside, or maybe even in a stores environment. From a stores management perspective, they may consider those to be, they can sit in drums, they can sit outside. But really within that safety data sheet, that'll say they should be stored within certain temperature parameters. And again, it's just due to that breakdown of, as soon as they're exposed to frost, I think the chance of the likelihood of the bacteria growing increases dramatically. So yeah, it's really important to make sure that they're stored correctly.
Yeah, perfect.
Again, engagement with multiple stakeholders, isn't it, across the organisation, and sharing that knowledge.
Yeah, we've got organisations that we work with who, you know, bulk store for people as well, you know, and they store, if you're buying in bulk and you've sort of sent out your storage and contracted it out to a warehouse, you know, what controls do they have? Are they storing your product that you've purchased correctly? You know, it might be that you have to start thinking about that that chain, that supply chain that you've got as well, and where your product is going or coming from.
Yes. Yeah, and I guess from an auditing perspective, doing a periodic audit on that, if you're auditing that under your 45 or 14 banner, or even just as any management system, as part of your deep dive annually that you can do on metalworking fluids, do you then follow that cradle to grave piece all the way back to the cradle and say, actually, are these handled as they should be? Yes, yeah,
exactly. And you know, and even, you know, and that's, you know, think about larger organisations, but even the smaller guys, you know, you said about the HSE being very on the health surveillance kick at the moment, and they are in different areas of health surveillance, whether it's metalworking fluids or whether it's wood dust exposures, or, you know, they're very hot. Health surveillance is a massive piece for them at the moment. So, and thinking about those smaller organisations as well, for those of you who work with smaller organisations, or if you're doing those supply chain bits that Kane's talking about, those supply chain audits, you've got smaller organisations in there, remembering as safety professionals that those organisations might not have the knowledge that you already have. You know, some of what we've said today and what Kane has said today, you know, is a bit back to basics for us, which is how we try and run these sessions, is to integrate that and some technical knowledge. But a lot of the organisations in the supply chains won't have that information. So it's about sharing that with them at the same time. Just lastly, Kane, I had one other question that I'd just noted down that I was interested in, and that was how your experience with the HSE had been around the issue.
Yeah, very amicable, and very reasonable in approach and very balanced. You know, with regards to some of our systems, the conversation was around LEV systems, but a number of our systems are actually dry, so we might do a specific tool cut, or there might be something very, very niche that we use a specific tool for. So on those scenarios, it's kept as a dry system. So we had the conversation around, well, do we, you know, is an LEV system required? And, you know, we're able to evidence through the risk assessment process, well, actually, that this is how we've quantified that risk. And yeah, it's really pragmatic, really balanced, really pragmatic, and yeah, really balanced, I think is the easiest way to summarize it. Yeah, it's positive.
Thank
we
you.
can't grumble as health and safety practitioners, you know, they're auditing us as health and safety practitioners to ensure that, you know, organisations are doing as they should be in compliance with various regulations. We have to act as, we have to support the businesses and organisations to put control measures in place that are reasonably practicable. And yeah, it certainly feels that the professionals that I've engaged with are balanced on that side.
Excellent, that's good to know. Sometimes we fear, don't we, as safety professionals, the HSE turning up, you know, that dreaded day when the inspector calls, or as managers, you know, what do I do? And it is about engaging it. They're not there to, you know, to prosecute you if you're not trying to do anything wrong. Generally, they are trying to help and trying to improve. Yes, contraventions, fee for intervention, yes, prosecutions happen, but usually if you're being, you know, fair and reasonable and making all the efforts you can as an organisation, that doesn't happen. And our job as professionals is to help them understand why we do what we do, isn't it?
Yeah,
sounds like you were very nice
the
to them.
Importance. Oh, sorry, my audio. yeah, you're up, and that goes back full circle to your point around keeping that that evidence trail of actually why we've come to those conclusions on some of our thought processes. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Exactly. Amazing. Thank you, Kane. Has anyone else got any other questions or comments that they wanted to throw in before we finish for the afternoon? No, doesn't look like it. Andy looks like he's about to type something.
Cheap brand. Super. Well, thank you so much for your attention, and yeah, some really good questions. And yeah, thank you, Natasha.
Amazing. Thank you, Kane. It's really useful. It's always nice when we get concise presentations with information that we can use and then get back to work and do everything we need to do. There's no need to drag them things out. It's not necessary. I hope you've all found it. Thank you, Graham. I hope you've all found Lee. You've all found it useful this afternoon. I hope you've all taken something away from it. And of course, go away, look up some of those documents, some of those guidance pieces of information that Kane's talking about, and dig in a bit deeper. We only have so much time within these sessions and stuff to prick your attention to get you thinking about these things. But there is a vast world of metalwork and fluid information out there that's useful to have a look over. Kane, did you want to add something? Put your hand up.
It was just to say what I'll do is all those links from my notes that were in the presentation. What I'll do is I'll take those out, and we'll be sure to put those in a LinkedIn post so that we're able to signpost you guys to everything that was referenced today.
Amazing. That's a brilliant idea. Thank you, Kane. Yes, and yeah, just to reiterate that, as Kane says, the LinkedIn that we've got, we'll be sharing that information. So jump on and follow us, and we'll be trying to get more out to you as we go. Thank you, everyone. Brenton, do you need to do anything else, or are we happy to?
No, just to thank everybody for attending this afternoon. Thanks, Kane, for that. Very informative. And welcome to all our new committee members again. And to you, Lady Chair, wish you the best of luck in the next 12 months.
Fingers crossed, hey?
Just here to support you guys. So thanks you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, Brenton. Lovely to see you all. For those of you who are not committee members, feel free to leave. For those that are, if you want to stay for a few minutes, we just normally have a few minutes wash up at the end of this as people have left. But if not, lovely to see you all, and we'll see you all at the next event.